Hi there! My name is Rachel. Welcome to the Legal Writing Team Clarity Group 1. We're so psyched to have you on the Team Clarity. In time, we know you're gonna be a better legal writer. At Clarity, our mission is to consider the needs of the reader, keep the writing short and simple, and think clear. Our vision is to create clarity of writing that follows clarity of thought. It's the lighthouse to everything we do at Clarity. We've been around together with consistency and effectiveness, but today we will talk about clarity. And clarity has 5 rules. Ready? Here we go. The 5 rules of clarity. First rule, using familiar and concrete words. Second rule, avoiding wide gaps between subject, verb, and object. Third rule, avoid misplaced or dangling modifiers. Fourth rule, avoid ambiguous pronoun references. And the 5th rule, using punctuation to prevent, not cause, ambiguity. Stay in tune while Team Clarity will discuss more.
Created using Powtoon. Created using Powtoon.
Clarity, Rule 1. Hi, I am Ray Vincent Neri Magdo and I'll be discussing to you Rule 1 using familiar and concrete words. Plain meaning is a byproduct of the use of definite and concrete language. The use of highfalutin words may impress people but often sacrifices simplicity and clarity of expression. Sometimes it merely is an attempt to cover one's inability to be definite or specific. For example, celestial denizens to identical plumage congregate in their own proximity. Otherwise, it's just a simple birds of the same feather flock together. Always remember, for Rule 1, plain meaning, avoid highfalutin words.
In this video, we will look into highfalutin. 16 adjectives with similar meanings will be reviewed in example sentences. Let's get started. Number 1. High-sounding, which means of language or ideas extravagant and grand. High-sounding. For example, high-sounding moralism. Number 2. Declamatory, which means vehement or impassioned in expression. Declamatory. For example, a long declamatory speech. Number 3. Ornate, which means of literary style using unusual words and complex constructions. Ornate. For example, peculiarly ornate and metaphorical language. Number 4. Pretentious, which means attempting to impress by affecting greater importance or merit than is actually possessed. Pretentious. For example, Clytemnestra is a pretentious name for a dog. Number 5. Flowery, which means of speech or writing full of elaborate or literary words and phrases. Flowery. For example, his flowery language made no impression. Number 6. Turgid, which means of language or style tediously pompous or bombastic. Turgid. For example, some turgid verses on the death of Prince Albert. Number 7. Tumid, which means especially of language or literary style pompous or bombastic. Tumid. For example, tumid oratory. Number 8. Orotund, which means of writing, style, or expression pompous or pretentious. Orotund. For example, the orotund rhetoric of his prose. Number 9. Oratorical, which means relating to the art or practice of public speaking. Oratorical. For example, oratorical skills. Number 10. Bombastic, which means high-sounding but with little meaning. Bombastic. For example, Howard really was the most bombastic prig. Number 11. Affected, which means artificial, pretentious, and designed to impress. Affected. For example, he was talking in the rather affected boom he used with strangers. Number 12. Sonorous, which means of a speech or style using imposing language. Sonorous. For example, he relished the sonorous words of condemnation. Number 13. High-flown, which means especially of language or ideas extravagant and grand-sounding. High-flown. For example, he had other more high-flown artistic notions in mind. Number 14. Pompous, which means affectedly grand, solemn, or self-important. Pompous. For example, pompous language. Number 15. Florid, which means excessively intricate or elaborate. Florid. For example, a florid, Baroque building. Number 16. Rhetorical, which means expressed in terms intended to persuade or impress. Rhetorical. For example, he had a tendency to engage in rhetorical hyperbole.
I am Mariel Samihon and I'm going to present rule number 2. Avoid wide gaps between subject, verbs, and object. Gaps. A sentence usually consists of a subject, verb, with the object of any, following the verb. For example, the lawyer shouted at the witness. If these three elements of a sentence are placed in order and near one another, the sentence becomes easily understandable. However, putting modifiers between the subject and the verb or between the verb and its object makes for a tedious reading. For example, the plaintiff, disgusted at how long it took for the court to decide such a simple ejectment case, filed a motion for early resolution. Well, this can be improved too. The plaintiff filed a motion for early resolution. He was disgusted at the court's delay in resolving his simple ejectment case. As you can see of the two examples, the second is the most understandable and simple one. There has been no modifiers inserted. It is easy and understandable compared to the first sentence. Letter B. Modifying the modifiers. Avoid nested modifiers, which modify the modifiers. When this happens, take away the nest of modifiers and make separate sentences. Example, with nest modifier, Maria, who at the time was carrying a bundle of newly rinsed clothes, some of which belonged to plaintiff's son, while trying to escape through the back gate, was caught by the plaintiff. In improved sentence, we can use this. Maria was caught by the plaintiff at the back as she tried to escape. She carried a bundle of newly rinsed clothes, some of which belonged to the plaintiff's son. So, in the second sentence, we are modifying the modifier.
Hello guys, I'm gabi sa tanan. Gabi karon but I'm reporting this in the afternoon, and I'd like to report on my part, which is rule number 3, which is avoiding misplaced or dangling modifiers. First of all, I'd like to tell, to be honest, is that I'm glad that this was assigned to me, because up to now I am still not familiar with sentence construction. Just learn how to write based on I imitate what I have read, so I don't really have a specific identifying the English structure or the sentence. So anyway, modifying words tend to do the work on whatever you put them near. Okay, what does that mean? By these modifying words can be in a form of one word or group of words, whether it's uh, adverb or adjective, to create an expression or a term. This one is, for example, um, the original sentence is, the judge ordered the marshal to eject the photographer. Okay, and if we put a modifier, which is a term, who was kicking and screaming, then it can modify subjects or what we call as nouns on the sentence structure. So itong modifier, the modifier that we have, who was kicking and screaming, can either can modify three personas, either the judge or the marshal or the photographer. And if we include them uh, in a sentence, there uh, there can be at least uh, three meaning or message on each sentences. Example for the first one, the judge, who was kicking and screaming, ordered the marshal to eject the photographer. So the term who was kicking and screaming if was referring to the judge, but on the second example, it refers to the marshal kicking and screaming. And the third one is, of course, the photographer, who is the one who was kicking and screaming. Of course, we already know that in as much as possible when we write, especially in legal forms, we should we should be able to clarify. We should our sentences should be clear, and as much as possible, it has to be short but simple and understandable. So, as a side note here, um, we can, even though we have already arranged the modifiers, its respective subjects, we can still try to reduce or simplify it further. Okay, example is the kicking and screaming judge ordered the marshal to eject the lensman. Lensman is other term for photographer, but letter-wise, it's shorter compared to the word photographer. Anyway, moving on, the general rule. Okay, so we have squinting modifiers. This modifies what precedes or what follows. Sometimes squinting modifiers are quite a challenge, especially if we are not aware it's a squinting modifier. You know, for example, like this one, a trustee who steals dividends often cannot be punished. So this is a one-word modifier, which is often or often. Anyway, it's quite confusing because it's either modifying dividends or modifying cannot or modifying punish. No, so it's a question of where to put it. No, so we already know that the general rule in squinting modifiers in writing it, if we put modifiers, so it's either before or after a certain subject or a particular word that you try or that you try to modify or try to specify. So questions whether, okay, so which one? So either of the three, no? We can put often in steals dividends. We can put often after the cannot be, punish, or after the word punish. So a trustee who often steals dividends cannot be punished. In the blue sentence, it modifies the stealing of dividends. On the red one, it modifies the frequency of punishment, or frequency of the degree of punishment. And the last one is it modifies uh, punishment itself. Okay, or I might or baliktad, the other way around. No, the red one is modifying the punishment, and the green one is actually modifying the frequency, or how often it is. No, the degree of frequency. Anyway, another examples on squinting modifiers is example we have here. If this contract is terminated under paragraph 3D1, agent shall be notified immediately to cancel all outstanding work orders. So another one word modifier, which is immediately. Yan. It's quite confusing though. Okay, which one to modify? Is it the notification or it is the cancellation? So a quick tip here is that you either choose a word that does not squint, or rearrange the sentence to avoid ambiguity. The rule of keeping it short and simple can be applicable here. So, and also, it suggests that if you have problems with on how, or if you are still confused or doubtful on which word you need to modify, you just simply remove it and probably paraphrase it. But on this case, should we use the modifying word immediately? Either we put it before notified or after cancel. So agents shall be immediately notified, meaning to say the agents, we should inform the agents as soon as possible, or agents shall be notified to cancel immediately. So once the contract is terminated, it should be enforced as soon as possible because it's immediate. So that's what it means. So please take note that even though we are allowed to place modifiers before or after certain subject, we should be reminded that the placement will eventually change the overall meaning of the message. So, yes. Example, this one, only. I have to admit that I'm not really an expert to put on the word only into whatever. I only put only. I only put only. This kind of word, I put it based on instinct, or if I have read it right, or once I have written it, something like that. But anyway, it's valid because eventually, according to the book, that it's usually a notorious troublemaker in legal writing. So the tip here in putting the word only, it should be put immediately before the word you want to modify. So in the sentence, she said that he shot her. Should you want to put the word only, the intention is it modifies the succeeding, or it modifies the succeeding word. So here's an example. Sentence 1 modifies she. the female person. The second modifies the the things that the female subject said. Third is it modified the action. Fourth modifies the male person. Fifth modifies another action, which is the shooting of a firearm or a gun. Six is modifying again. Six and seven modifying the female person. Yeah. So she said that he shot her only. Yeah, I have to admit it's quite confusing as well. Anyway, so another rule, if it creates ambiguity, meaning to say confusion or not vague or not clear, no, try to isolate it at the beginning of the end of the sentence. So, pwede di ay na you can put only at the beginning or at the end. If it's still not working if it's still not working the way it is working in the first example. So, yan, examples. Lessee shall use the vessel only for recreation. It's not here because is it vessel only or it is only for recreation? So in order to be clear, it's either we put only in the last. So to determine that it specifies under recreation, or to modify the action of, or to modify the subject of the parent corporation that sells the share. Okay. All right. Okay. So another things to watch out when it comes to ambiguity. We're done with the modifiers. This time is ambiguity, which is more complex and confusing. Okay. It says here that we should watch out for ambiguity sentences, especially dealing with multiple subjects and the way we place commas in between different topics or different group of terms. All right. So example here is the grantor was Maxwell Aaron, father of Sarah Aaron, who later married Pat Snyder. So the sentence was ambiguous because it's not clear who is Pat married to, whether she's married to Maxwell or Sarah. But eventually, okay. And the author also said here that sometimes it became more complicated because the writer or most of the writers or some of the writers make it complicated. So it's no longer clear and it's no longer simple. Example here is the grantor was Maxwell Aaron, father of Sarah Aaron, which said Maxwell Aaron later married Pat Snyder. So somewhat siya confusing. But dealing with this, it's either you avoid ambiguity by placing the solution is either you avoid is basically avoiding the ambiguity by placing the relative pronoun such as who, which, and that right after the word to which it relates. So the easier to understand if we put the relative pronouns. The grantor was Sarah Aaron's father. So yang di pamubo, Maxwell Aaron, who later married Pat Snyder. So it's clear now that the grantor was Sarah Aaron, and she has a father who is Maxwell Aaron. And then Maxwell was later married to Pat Snyder. Okay. So, yun. Right. But sometimes, even relative pronouns can what we call this problematic. No? It sometimes do not follow the rules that we've had before. In fact, putting relative pronoun can be a problem in itself, especially in this example that claims for expenses which must not exceed $100 must be made within 30 days. So it put which, it has a relative pronoun of which. So that means that it might mean whether it's either claims that must not exceed $100 or expenses which must not exceed $100. So the solution is remove again the relative pronoun like this one and be clear about it. So direct to the point. Claims for expenses must not exceed $100. Expenses. So the first one is referring to the claims which must not exceed $100. If your intention is to emphasize claims, or more direct, if you are emphasizing expenses, you put expenses. Claims must not exceed $100. Then, to be specific or to be in general, claims for expenses must be made within 30 days. So I guess that's it for my report. And I hope you have refreshed your memories or have learned something new, because for I, for one, is just had a moment of realizations. So I'm gonna end now, and I'll turn over to my group mate.
Rule number 4. Avoid ambiguous pronoun sentences. A. Concept. Careless use of pronouns can result in ambiguity problems. This occurs when the writer allows multiple antecedents as possible references to a single pronoun. Moreover, pronouns when not placed properly can point to the wrong noun, thereby changing the meaning of the sentence. For example, your skills will surely benefit your friends, so be sure to use them. The word them may refer to the skills or friends, making the sentence ambiguous. B. How to avoid ambiguous pronoun references. To avoid confusion, one must rephrase the sentence to clearly identify the antecedent. Example, Robert's father will use his car for the picnic. The question will be, whose car will be used? The better sentence will be, Robert's father will use Robert's car for the picnic. Here, we are sure whose car will be used. Demonstrative pronouns such as this, that, these, those, them should only be used when the antecedent is definitely established. Example, in a poor sentence, we can say, repressed jealousy and hatred among brothers and sisters is counterproductive. You must get rid of them. The question is, does them refer to jealousy and hatred or to the brothers and sisters? So, the better sentence to say is that repressed jealousy and hatred among siblings is Sometimes, the use of demonstrative pronouns is inherently ambiguous because the antecedent is not given but assumed. Example, in a poor sentence, we can say, that is what I have been waiting to hear from you. But the question is, what does that refer to? So, in order to be able to be understand properly, a better sentence would be, that praised love thy neighbor is what I have been waiting for to hear from you.
Created using Powtoon.
Good day, everyone. In the continuation of our report regarding clarity, let's proceed to rule number 5. Using punctuation to prevent, not cause, an ambiguity. Punctuations are marks in written communication used to help the reader better understanding. One such use to eliminate ambiguity. Reckless use of punctuation can have absurd results. For example, the writer gratefully acknowledged the invaluable help of his co-teachers in the state university, the honorable governor, and the president of the Republic of the Philippines. In this sentence, the serial comma used before the conjunction and or in a list of 3 or more items is a case in point. Without the serial comma, the governor and the president becomes the co-teachers of the author in this statement. Another example. The following sentence is ambiguous. I cook banana, carrot, ubi, and chocolate cakes. The reader would not know if 3 or 4 cakes are being talked about. Putting a comma after ube indicates that the ube and chocolate cakes are separate items. On the other hand, reckless use of serial comma also results in ambiguity. For example, the writer gratefully acknowledges the invaluable help of his mother, the Honorable Provincial Governor Elsie Esplera, and the President of the Republic of the Philippines. In this case, in this sentence, the author unwittingly made it appear that the Lady Governor is his mother when such is not the case. To be able to avoid both cases from occurring, the sentence has to be rephrased to avoid listing the items in an ambiguous manner. For example, after mother, put the conjunction as well as, and it goes like this. His mother as well as the Honorable Provincial Governor Elsie Esplera.